welcome to the November 28th, 2023 school committee meeting here at Tyngsborough PGC room. I officially call this meeting to order. My name is Anthony Cinerell, and we'll start with introductions to my
Bari Keek, student representative.
Jeff Bowe.
Becky Stanton.
Mike Woodlock, Assistant Superintendent.
Hi, Mike Flanagan, Superintendent.
Daniela Thanis.
Ryan McMahon.
Rob Mullen.
Joe Messina, Business Administrator.
If everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will remind everyone that these meetings are audio and video recorded for your viewing pleasure. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the October 3rd, 2023 Technology Subcommittee meeting minutes and the November 14th, 2023 School Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That carries 600. Thank you. Citizens' time? Seeing none. Correspondence?
None at this time, Mr. Chair.
Personnel? Notification of intent to retire?
We do have one notification of intent to retire. Apologize, we usually coordinate that beforehand.
We do.
Ms. Jill Frechette, Tyngsborough Elementary School teacher, 26-plus years of service. Though it says Tyngsborough Elementary School, she's been a key component in this district for a long time, and she's been a member of the high school for many years and the middle school for several years, and now she's at the elementary school. So best of luck to Jill in her retirement at the end of the year.
Thank you, Joe, for everything you've done for the children of Tyngsborough. Share the success. Bari.
We're starting a new trimester this week, so at the elementary school next week, families will receive a notification regarding a new screener at TES. Our school will be piloting the Social, Academic, and Emotional Behavior Risk Screener. It is a brief norm reference tool for screening all students to identify those who could be at risk for social and emotional behavior challenges. We will utilize this information to look at school-wide systems of support for social, emotional learning, and behavior. At the middle school, I hope you all had a good holiday. We just completed the annual book fair at the middle school, with students finding some great titles to take home and read. The student council sponsored a blanket making event and made 24 blankets for people in need. The trimester ended with students finishing up their work in the best way they could. As we move into the holiday season, we will be doing activities in our advisory block around gratitude and appreciation. At the high school, trimester 1 has come to an end, with trimester 2 getting underway yesterday. Report cards will be available on Friday, December 1st. Congratulations to all our fall athletes, particularly our senior athletes for their last 4 years. 20 students will be traveling to Give Kids the World on Sunday to volunteer for the week. Congratulations to Dorothy on being accepted as a Code.org student ambassador. The goal of the program is to promote computer science to female students. That's all for this time.
Thank you, Bari.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to take 9A out of order, please.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that carries 600. Dr. Flanagan.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to introduce our new SRO, Chris Gustafson, who'll come up to the table and join us here. As you know, many of you know, Bethany moved to a different division within the police department last year, more of a community outreach thing, I think, with George and whatnot. And I know she's still covering some of the schools, but fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work with the chief and the deputy chief last year to interview candidates for the new SRO position this year. And I am thrilled to say what a pleasant addition it's been having Officer Gustafson with us this year. He's made some incredible connections with kids. He's at every game. I heard the high school principal and AD on the sideline say, my God, he's got to get the MVP because he's at everything. So, everything we talked about during the interview process, it was, and I hate to harken back to the old days, but it was, we need the next Sergeant Joe Pivorato. We need the next Steve Manning, somebody who's going to be around, who's going to be appealing this community, make connections with our kids. That's what we're looking for the long term. And Bethany did a great job at that. It was difficult with the dog because the dog had its own needs. So Chris went through the interview process, did a great job, and the chief was fortunate enough to recommend him to us. So he's here to tell you a little bit about who he is, what he does, and a typical week, I think. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Flanagan. Again, my name is
Officer Chris Gustafson, Tyngsborough Police Department. I joined the Tyngsborough Police Department in 2015 as a reserve. I became full-time in 2019. Prior to that, though, I was a correctional officer for almost 11 years at South Bay House of Correction in Boston. My wife and I moved here, I believe it was 2019, and my two daughters have gone to school here ever since they were 3 months old. They've been they have the daycare, and that's, yeah. My oldest is in 6th grade, and the youngest is in 3rd, so. My week at a glance, more or less, is I show up at the high school, middle school campus every day and greet the kids at the high school as they come in. And then I'll walk around the hallways a little bit, usually, and then I head over to the elementary school campus and greet the kids right as they pull in the long driveway onto campus, and wave at all the kids on the bus and in their cars, and they seem to love it. So I hope to keep that up even into the snow. I gotta talk to Dr. Salmon about possibly getting some of the snow being able to plow out of the way, so I have a place to park out of the way, but.
We can make that work. We can figure that out.
So I hope to continue that. And then I usually return back to this campus and try to be present in the hallways. I'll make my rounds every so often just to walk around, show my face, even at the middle school. And then I try to break up my week at the lunches. So I try to do lunch here twice a week, and I try to do the middle school twice a week, and then I try to do the elementary school once a week, depending on my my schedule. So, and then, like Dr. Flanagan said, I'm trying to make a connection with these kids. As we all know, I feel like the high school kids are the hardest. So I've been trying to go to as many of the sporting events that I can go to. I went to all the football games. I tried to go to boys soccer, girls soccer. I didn't go to as many field hockey games as I would have liked to, but my schedule was just kind of crazy at the time. And I plan on continuing that in the winter and the spring with everything going on. I went to the first homecoming dance that the THS has had in a long time. Bari, and continue just to go to all the events, and try to make the connections with the kids. And the future, just, again, continue to grow the bond with the kids and the faculty, make those connections, and remain visible, and just show the kids that I'm there for them, not in a negative way, obviously, but there for them for anything. Just be talking about day-to-day things. And then, I try to talk to the administration, let them know what's going on, and ask them for ideas where I can improve or so forth.
So I think I just want to add on there, I think that's a critical component. Chris has been an integral part of our safety team meeting as well. You're not hearing the support he provides the administration on a regular basis to deal with some of the more challenging issues, because he's not focusing on that. He's focusing on being a part of working with the kids. It's one of the things that honestly scared me was his correctional facility background. We didn't want a prison guard here. We want somebody that connects with the kids that can and can make these connections, even if it's not on a daily basis. It's when the students in crisis who say, that's a familiar face that I know that's always around that I can go to. So I think Chris has done a great job of doing that and kind of pushing into the school communities of all three schools. He's an absolute asset to the administration when we need him, but when we don't need him, he's out there making those connections, which is critical for that. So that being said, the committee can have any questions for him. I'm sure I'd be happy to answer them.
Sure, I have questions. So I know in the past we had a couple SROs we had to provide support to the VOC. I don't know if we had to support innovation in our Notre Dame. Do we still have those obligations?
So the Voc has two offices over there full-time, so I won't be going over there. My main focus is the Tyngsborough Public Schools, but if Innovation, Valley, or Notre Dame call me, I go and I service whatever the need possibly is. It's mostly phone calls, but every once in a while I'll have to go to campus and deal with the issue.
And Chris, was that part of Bethany's responsibility too? Does she push into those schools as well, I thought,
Yeah.
a little bit?
Yes.
So it's not, one person covering 5 schools. He's Tyngsborough Public Schools, but on the off chance he needs to go, I think that's what he's done.
Okay. So obviously you're attending a lot of events. That's really impressive. Do you think it's working? Do you feel you're making the connections that you're trying to make?
I believe I do. I am, and it's working. From the beginning of the school year, being out there, saying hi to kids, to the students as they came in, get a couple here and there, but at this point, I would say there's more than half are saying hello to me first before I say good morning. And they're saying my name, they're addressing me. So I think it's making a difference, personally.
That's awesome. One more. What do you think the biggest challenge was going from, being a corrections officer to working with students every day?
I don't really think there was too much of I don't think it was that difficult for me. When I left in 2018, and I had been working overnights, but I also worked with, at the time when I was at the jail, there was a lot of juveniles. So we had, at that time, 17 years old could be being housed. And I did talk to a lot of those kids and, try to steer them in the right direction. But talking to them, it helps you out because you treat them how they should be treated. They're people, just like we're people, just like the kids. Kids they're not, they're smart. They know when they're being talked to a certain way. So you treat them the way they want to be treated, and I feel you get a good feedback.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, absolutely.
Mine's more just a comment. As a parent, I've noticed you at all the games. And also, I know you're here as a correctional officer, but from one parent to another, that's really impressive that, you're at so many games. The kids notice it. Even the kids that aren't directly connecting with you, they notice it. I have kids, either mine or relatives, through all 3 schools, and I've heard a comment from every single one of them about Officer Gustafson. They know that you're a friendly face. Whether you're actually, having that one-on-one interaction with them or not, they're noticing. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that because you don't always hear that feedback. You hear from some staff saying that they think you're making a difference, but you don't really hear it unless you don't really know unless it's from a parent. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Yeah, your children are going to have more.
Perfect. Just to piggyback on what Becky had just said, we've obviously noticed you at the games as well, and I know after one of the games, we did have a few players back at the house, and they all were still talking about the sign that you held up at one of the football games.
Yeah.
That got everybody going, and it was, I think adding that sense of humor into that role has been very, very helpful, and I think even if they maybe haven't reached out to you directly, they definitely notice, and they definitely see you as that friendly face that they can approach if they need to. So thank you for that.
No problem. Thank you.
Question for you, as far as, now that you've been in the schools for a little bit, is there anything that you are could be looking for from either the school committee members or from parents of this community that you're seeing in the schools that we can be helpful to you?
At this time, Not really. I feel like we have a great community. The kids are great. It's just, all kids are different, and it takes a little bit to break down those walls and get to know them. Some are open, some are more closed off, but, even the ones that are shyer, that don't talk as much, are starting to say hello to me and talk to me a little bit more. So I think it's just, it's the waiting game and trying to keep doing what I've been doing. So,
I'd like to ask a follow-up question. What was the sign?
excuse me?
What was the sign you held?
Cheer or go to jail.
Perfect.
Cheerleaders asked me to do it, and I was like, I don't know. I was like, yeah, let's do it. So,
It worked, right? So
it worked. The kids, when I turned around with that sign, the look on some of the kids' faces, they were like, what?
That's awesome.
And it got loud.
It did get loud.
That's great.
I have a comment and a question. The comment is to piggyback off of Becky and Jeff. When you were at the dance party at the end of the year at TES last year, my kids immediately came home, and my daughter was all, the new student resource officer was dancing with us, and she was all excited, and we were his bodyguards. And so I think I can't speak for the older kids, but at the younger kid level, you definitely had an immediate impact, and it reminded me of my school resource officer, who I have fond memories of. And so I'm glad that you're doing that for the kids now, and so thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The question I have is, what was it that drove you to switch to be an SRO, and is there a program or resource that you would love to get in the hands of the kids now that you're growing in the role and getting to know everybody a little bit?
The reason why I wanted to become a school resource officer is because I felt it was important to show kids that police aren't, just because police are around doesn't mean it's a negative. We're a resource. Unfortunately, when most people deal with law enforcement, it's their worst day or one of their worst days, right? But I want kids to know that we're not always around just because it's your worst day. We're there to support you regardless. And for resources, off the top of my head right now, I can't think of anything.
I think one of the things we're going to do in the spring is start to collaborate and talk about what, guest speakers can we get in here, and how can we collaborate a little more with the police department. We both talked about sharing professional development money to really talk about getting important people that will have a positive influence in front of our kids. So I think the first trimester is under our belt now. When we get back from the holidays, we'll start to have those conversations. And I think a lot of that was happening at some of the safety meetings as well, as we talk proactively about where we can go with kids. So, but it's nice to have a partner that's going to be right there.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll just piggyback on what some of them said real quick. Just simply, I have a foreign exchange student staying with me. I attended a lot of soccer games. I think were at every one of them. And the students did say hello to you by name as they walked in and out, and there was a lot of interaction, which was awesome to see. And just thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for the career that you chose and for protecting the residents, and more important, or just as important, the children of Tyngsborough Public Schools.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. So.
That's all we have, Chris. Thanks for
Yeah.
coming.
All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much. And if
Thank you.
there's anything we can do for you or anything you need from us, please let us know.
All right, we'll do.
You're
Thank you
more
very
than
much.
welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. You're also more than welcome to leave.
It's not a school
I have a
event.
sick kid at home, so.
It's not a sporting event, but
Thank you.
thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Subcommittee update, superintendent evaluation subcommittee met tonight, which is Rebecca, Ryan, and myself. We met with the superintendent, and you'll hear more about that in executive session this evening. Unfinished business, MSBA update.
So, Mr. Chair, we'll jump into the slide deck here. Upcoming meetings, just a reminder, our next meeting is December 12th. because today is November 28th. So December 12th is our next meeting. That's our only January meeting. We do not have a school building committee meeting in December either. So December 12th is the next meeting for school building committee, and then we kind of get into the budget season. Mr. Messina will talk a little bit more about that later. MSBA update, it's pretty quiet right now on our front. You can, as you pulled in, I don't know if it's too dark, but hopefully you can see the attempt at tenting right now. The wind is whipping through it. So I feel like the poor guys are doing the same work multiple times, but they are gonna tent the building. And I think the plan is to have that done within the next 2 weeks so that they can begin to heat it and pour the foundation for the first floor, second floor. So that is ongoing work. In terms of our OAC meetings, those are still happening. They're still working on mechanical, electrical, and plumbing design right now. December 6th, on Wednesday, December 6th, Mr. Woodlock and I are going to Hartford, Connecticut for a presentation from a company, from one of the distributors that we met in Charlotte. And basically, this is gonna talk, it's gonna be a presentation about the science behind furniture and the importance of having flexible furniture. So when people say, why did you pick that? We didn't pick it because it was blue. We picked it because it's best for learning, it's best for students, and it's best for a flexible school moving forward. So we'll learn a little bit more about that next week. And I think right now, and I'll nail this down this Thursday, on a Saturday morning in January, we'd like to have a site walkthrough for both the school building committee and the school committee. So I want to find out exactly when the slabs will be poured on the first and second floor so that we can walk around. Right now, it's a little bit of a tripping hazard walking around there. But once those slabs are poured and cured, I'd like to set up a Saturday morning to make available for members of the committee and building committee to come tour the site. It's really kind of impressive when you're standing on the inside of it. It's really exciting. It becomes a little bit more real. So that's where we are in terms of MSBA update at this point.
Excellent, thank you. Teaching and learning, Mr. Woodlock.
That's me. All right, so for this meeting and the next meeting, I have a lot of information to share, and I'm going to try and not just throw too many numbers at you, but happy to take questions, and if I can't answer them on the spot, I'll definitely get back to you on them. So I've just been in too many meetings where there was so much data presented that my eyes glazed over, and I don't want that to happen to you, and certainly not all the viewers at home. So I want to share with you a little bit of an update on our Inclusive Academy that we talked about at the beginning of the year in the summer. You know, that free service we were going to get from DESE. Well, that's actually happening, and we've met with our technical assistant on several occasions, provided a lot of information. They accessed all the information that we share, the state mandated reporting and so on. So out of that came a landscape analysis. That's what they refer to it as. And it looks at our overall performance. So again, this is the Inclusive Academy. So how inclusive are we being, or in other words, how well are we addressing the needs of all of our students? So they look at a number of different things, including high quality instructional materials. The first thing I would say is, like, what is that? So there's a service that DESE provides called Curate, which they look at different curriculum, and they vet it and say, like, this is very high quality. And so we're not just picking from things that may or may not be good. We've all made those decisions in our lives. We're like, I wish I didn't pick that, right? So they're vetting some of these things out. And so they, in our landscape analysis, they evaluate, like, are we using high quality materials? Are we doing those kind of things? And so an example of that would be like our new ELA curriculum in the elementary school, our new math curriculum at the middle school, our IXL diagnostic testing, the Keys to Literacy professional development that we're receiving, and the instructional practices inherent in that. So these are all things that qualify as high quality materials. Effective instructional practices, using universal design for learning and co-teaching, those things are things that we've been speaking about here. Data systems and tiered support framework. So it's a pretty big report, or maybe like 10 to 15 pages. But I just wanted to provide some of the highlights there of what what they've shared with us as recommendations. These are things we should work on to, and not to say that we're not working towards inclusivity, but if we focus on these specific things, that'll lead us to greater inclusivity. And so an equity-centered approach. Oh, and one thing I wanted to say about this, some of the good things about these highlights, is that it really validated our self-reflection as of last year, and what I'm going to be sharing here and what you can see on the slide, these things I'm hoping you recognize as we've heard about this from our SDI. These are things that are already there that we're already working on. So the landscape analysis is really helpful to kind of validate that we're moving in the right direction, but also give us some specifics and some help in getting there. So a district-wide equity-centered approach to education just generally. Data-driven decision-making and culture. We've talked about data pretty recently here and how we've utilized some of our staff days to analyze data and look at how we go about the data process, not just look at it and move on, but make sure it's a circular process where we're coming back and evaluating, do we make good decisions based on that data? Strengthening inclusive practice, like aligning instructional strategies with universal design principles and providing high-quality instructional materials that we just talked about to accommodate diverse learning needs. And targeted interventions, things looking at things like chronic absenteeism, declining achievement in some areas, lower access to advanced coursework, and really focusing, and this is something that I think they're going to help us do, is when we have interventions to address some of these needs, that we're doing it in a very proactive and specific way, not just throwing something at it temporarily, but for a decent length of time and then evaluating if it's had impact. And that's a big word that we keep using over and over again. When we do things, when we put things in our SDI, what's the impact? Not just did we achieve the benchmarks we said we would do, but did it have the proper impact? And if it didn't, back to the drawing board, let's start again. So some of the data that was included in the landscape analysis helps us identify some of the things we'll talk about next week when I talk a little bit about our MCAS scores. And our MCAS scores, again, are a really important measure, but just one measure. But one thing that we looked at when we looked at our MCAS scores and the raw scores from this year is, God, we really expected kind of a bigger bump. I think all of us that looked at it like, I thought our scores would go up a lot more now that we're 1 year past the pandemic and things are much more normal. But as we got deeper into the landscape analysis, there are some reasons why maybe we didn't see that. They may not be the exact reasons, but things that nonetheless we need to be aware of. And so I'll call your attention to a few of these things in our demographic data, which is specifically the 3-year trends in Tyngsborough compared to the state trends. We've seen a higher than average increase in our low-income students. We've seen almost 3 percentage points more than 3 percentage points more in our students with disabilities compared to the state. And our ELL population, the state trend is 1.6% increase. We've increased by 3.1%. And a lot of these things have hit directly at the elementary school population. So you have been really helpful in helping us address some of these things, but we're always lagging behind, right? So when we identify that these things, we're struggling to meet some of these needs, it takes a whole budget cycle to begin to address those. So I think those things are happening with your support in place, that we're addressing some of those things. But I think it's a really important bit of information, one that our technical assistant was like, whoa, these numbers are really big. So, so I would say that, our MCAS scores weren't as high as we hoped they would be, but they were definitely improving. They're getting better. And in spite of a really, a double percentage points increase compared to the state in our students that are considered high needs. That's our EL population, our students with disabilities, and our low-income students. So just an idea, and this is kind of a preview for next week, but just to think about MCAS scores, a lot of time when we think about MCAS scores, we think about those raw scores, where students come back with a score and then they're rated either as, needs or partially met, did not meet, or hopefully exceeded. Those are kind of what we look at, especially as a parent, like, all right, where are my kids at? But sometimes the more important things to look at are something called student growth percentiles. And if we look at this slide, our student growth percentiles in ELA and math grades 4 through 8, we see some interesting things with those specific subgroups that I just mentioned as having significant increases. So if we look at our MCAS scores, where was I? If we look at our math our ELA MCAS scores, and we look at specifically like our high needs population. In 2022, we had a 39 for our student growth percentile. As we look at 2023, it's 47. In low-income families, or students, it was 40. In 2023, it was 47. In our EL population, it was 44, and then 47. So the student growth percentile is looking at all the students that scored in a particular spot during the last testing phase and how their growth compares to students that scored in a similar fashion that they did. So we're hoping that's going to be somewhere between like 40 and 60 is considered really good. Okay, anything beyond that is considered outstanding. So we are definitely trending in the right direction, especially with these subgroups of students that we really want to make sure are getting their needs met. If we look at math, we see a much more leveled playing field here for our student growth percentage. It did not increase quite as much. So that's something that we'll have to monitor as we go forward. But just a little bit of a preview, just the difference between raw scores and what gets rated as, not meets or exceeds, and then that growth percentile, which can be, we could have a student that doesn't meet, the standard, but their growth percentile might be 95%, which is a huge win. So we just want to make sure that when we look at data, we have a kind of a bit of wisdom for what it represents and what it doesn't.
Mr. Whitlock,
Yes, sir.
I just don't understand these numbers. Okay. Sorry. Is this a percentage of students that improved since the previous test? Is that what this is? I don't know what a 47 is.
So it compares to all the other students within a certain range that scored in a similar fashion.
Okay.
So SGP, I'm not an expert on this, but what I do know is SGPs between like 35 and 50 are considered pretty normal. So once we get over 50, then those students are performing better than half of the other students that scored in a similar range last time.
Okay.
So it's a comparison to where other students that scored in that range were and where they are now. Meaning, like, it's a way to, let me rephrase. If you did not meet the standard, that tells you just that they didn't meet the standard.
Well,
but the student growth percentile can tell you,
end, right?
yeah, either, if the student growth percentile is 2, that means they've made virtually no growth compared to their peers. And so moving up is going to tell you that they may not have met where we wanted them to be, like ultimately where we want them to be, but they're making significant progress. And that's an important piece of data to have.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for stopping me, because I know I'm rushing through some of this a little bit. So another thing that they look at is accountability data. Accountability data is essentially a report card on our inclusive practices. And if you dig into the accountability data, you can look at specific things that the state identifies and indexes that gives us goals each year and whether or not we've met those goals. So our accountability percentage was 52%, which is okay. It's not great, but it's certainly not terrible. So within that accountability data, we're able to identify some really specific things that we can work on. So again, there's some links in here that you can dive into. It's on the DESE website, and we can go through and specifically look at, like, this is where we scored. It's always out of 4, so 2 out of 4, 0 out of 4, 4 out of 4. And that's good information to have, but it's also, again, you need to have kind of a trained eye to understand exactly what that may or may not mean. So I'll give you some highlights from our accountability data. Our high school raw MCAS scores, meaning those ones that are, meets, did not meet, so on. High school MCAS achievement raw scores, very good, 4 out of 4. K through 8 EL proficiency, very good. High school access to advanced coursework comparisons. The state puts out a lot of different, like, AP courses and really high-level courses in math and so on, and whether or not all of our students have access to those courses. So in some districts, there may be a lot of prerequisites. There may be so much inhibiting, say, a student with an IEP to get to advanced coursework. Our school rated very highly there, so that's a big plus. Growth of the lowest performing students in math in K through 8 was very strong. Where we could experience more growth. So a lot of opportunity for growth if we're focusing on some of these things. Our SGP for ELA district-wide. We didn't see huge student growth percentile increases, and we'd like to work on that. Math achievement K through 8, math growth district-wide, chronic absenteeism, and high needs population achievement and growth. So our high needs population, again, is that those EL students, our low-income students, and our students with disabilities. We want to see their achievement and growth. That's always going to be something that we focus on. But one thing I kind of put an asterisk next to here was chronic absenteeism, because we scored perfectly on chronic absenteeism, and that doesn't tell the whole story. Why we scored perfectly on chronic absenteeism, if you look at the data here, is because our target to improve was so high because our chronic absenteeism from previous years was so high. So if we look at 3-year trends for all students in our district, we were 15%. The state was going down. So we've increased our chronic absenteeism by 15% over the last 3 years, where the state has decreased. So that's kind of a big deal. And if we look at some of these categories we talk about inclusion, we're trying to make sure we're focusing on those students that need the most scaffolding and support, which include a lot of the demographics we may see here, including our low income, our high needs, our ELL population, some of our lower represented demographic groups for race, making sure that we're making cultural strides in our district. Anytime we have these students out of school more than the state average, we're going to see a negative impact. And so you probably have noticed in the s'mores that have gone out from the elementary school and the middle school, focusing on making sure our kids get to school. Having our kids in school is the best possible thing we can do to increase all of our data in a positive way. And so chronic absenteeism, you wouldn't think it would be an issue in Tyngsborough, but apparently it is. And so now we know, now we can do better. And so, I mean, that's obviously a partnership with the school and the community as well.
Before we move on, so is chronic absenteeism defined as missing 10% or more of school days?
Excuse me, correct.
So 23.6% of all of our students are missing at least 10% of the year?
Yep. Now, that doesn't mean some of these aren't excused, and but some of them are and some of them aren't. Okay? But the fact of the matter is, excused or not, if our kids aren't in school, they're missing out. Not every school day is the best day in the world, I get that. It's not always going to be the most impactful day, but when we see this build up as the percentages are, we can't argue with them. This is what the state has told us. We need to do a better job. So it's incumbent upon us as the schools to do community outreach to make sure that we're changing the way that we handle absenteeism, that we're reaching out to homes and making sure that people have the supports they need to get in. It's not, sometimes it's home issues and kids can't get in, or there's health issues, and we need to be a support to those families.
Do you have this broken down by the individual schools by any chance?
I don't, but I probably
Easy enough to do.
could
Okay.
find out.
Yeah, it's all in our power school system. It's very easy to do.
Okay. Yeah, this is kind of alarming, honestly.
Yeah, and I know it's not the first time we brought it up here. You know, it's been talked about. But when you see the data,
Yeah,
you're like, whoa, especially compared to the state. So,
right. And I'm curious, I don't want to dive too deep into the weeds, but, a student misses one class at a high school, does that count as an absenteeism? So like, are the opportunities for absenteeism higher at the middle and high schools where you have individual courses taken attendance versus the elementary school where you get one attendance for the whole day?
I'd have to see how the state characterizes that.
Yeah.
Generally, at the high school, if you're here till 11 o'clock, you're not counted as absent. So missing one class wouldn't necessarily put you
Okay.
on this list, and that's something we can certainly dive into with Power School.
Yeah, I mean, but we've already taken some steps to address some of these things, which is good. Last year, we at the high school, there was an adjustment to you were briefed on it, there was an adjustment to the exam schedule because we were missing out on classroom instruction time because kids just weren't coming during exam time. So that just wasn't working. It wasn't a useful application of our teaching time. And I know that Mr. Pollitt, Mrs. Kavanaugh have been working really hard to get the word out to parents and make sure that we're getting kids in as much as possible. Now, sometimes kids need to be absent. We don't want people sending their kids to school when they're sick. And sometimes kids miss a day of school here or there on the tail end of a vacation or something like that. And I'm not saying that's not appropriate occasionally too. But we just know in school means positive differences. So we want to work on that. All right, I got one last slide, and I think I mentioned this already, but that access to advanced coursework, and this is really a high school slide, but I wanted to end on a high note for sure. You can see 2001, 21, 22, and 23 achievement. That's the percentage of students that have access to advanced coursework. And it's not always, and I can, if you're interested, I can share the list of the courses that, they're really high-level courses like advanced placement and the highest level of math courses that we have and things like that. Not easy to get to, but a lot of our students in this building are getting into those classes. And I think it's been, ever since Mr. Champa and Dr. Flanagan were administrators in this building, it hasn't always been, and I've always liked this about Tyngsborough Public Schools, and it hasn't always been about like, we want to compare our AP scores to everyone else in the state. We've always said, like, we want to compare our demographics and our AP scores to anyone who cares to, meaning give it a shot. You're not, you don't have to have 5 prerequisites to get into AP biology. You don't have to have, the best GPA to take an AP, lit or language class. A lot of kids take that. They don't always do great on the AP test, but they challenge themselves and they feel comfortable being in those classes. And the scheduling has made it possible for that to happen. So I put this on here because this is one of the things I'm most proud of, is that kids in this school, we can do better, we can keep pushing that, but kids in this school have access to honors level and high level courses, and that's really important. All right, any questions for me? Again, I'll have more MCAS information next week. Just so you're aware, because once I share that with you next week, please ask me questions, ask for more information, and I'll bring it back. I just don't want to throw a bunch of data in your lap. But what I asked our principals to do was share, based on your examination during your staff development days of the data, the MCAS data, where are areas for growth, 2 or 3, and where are areas you're really proud of. Now, some of these I might have touched upon tonight, but in each building principal has shared that with me, and that I will put it in a presentation and share that with you. If there's additional information or you're curious about something else, I may not be able to answer it on the spot, but I'm more than happy to bring it back.
For the next time you come on data, I would just ask where possible, break it up by the schools.
The absenteeism?
It's just any data,
Sure,
where it makes sense.
you got it.
And Mr. Woodlock, if we could go back to that slide, all students in 2021, 8.7%, 2023, 23.6, but it jumped 16 points in that 1 year, which was obviously our
Coming out of
COVID year.
COVID. I think ever across the state, it was really low because a lot of state were either hybrid or remote for part of it. So I don't think we got accurate numbers.
All right, I was gonna say, is there data before 2021 to see, or did all of our kids get good attendance because
I
they
can
were
try and look
remote?
back further and
I'm just
see
curious.
if it's still available. Yeah.
Was it 8.7% in 2019, 18, 17, or was it 26%?
It's a good question. Let's see if I can find that.
To your point, Tony,
Yes.
I mean, now, I know when I think of it as a parent now, I'm more inclined, I'm gonna admit this on TV, to say, I'm gonna keep you home because you're sick.
Mhm.
Whereas previously, I would have been like, you can tough it out. So,
It's a fine
There's,
line.
there's been a
It's a
culture
fine line.
shift. There's definitely
There
been a
has
culture
been,
shift.
for sure.
Yeah, and understandably too. Like, I would be completely understanding of a parent who's like, with all the stuff that's been going around, especially the last few years, like, just stay home.
Yep.
Totally okay.
And we've asked them
Yeah,
to keep
of
their
course.
children home.
So, like,
Yes.
it's just being aware of it, I've been guilty of it myself, like, Kate, I'm going here, why don't you come with me? It'll be fun, take a day out of school.
So I think there's a difference between the occasional, hey, I don't feel good today, and 10%'s a lot. Right. Yeah,
But
that's
that
almost a
adds
full
up
month.
if you think about it.
Yeah.
There's 22 working days in a month, so,
But I
that's
think-
the minimum threshold. So some kids are missing a full month of school.
But students can miss what ends up being 18 days, right? You could miss 18 days and not really be in any attendance violation. Some days are excused or anything like that, and a lot of students do fine anyway. But again, 180 days, if we can get them for 171, that would be great.
So that actually brings up, so like, when 8th graders go to DC, do those all count
No.
as absences?
That's part of a school, they were
Okay.
part of school days.
But I would be really interested in 18, 19, 20, and see where the difference is, or if 21 was just an oddball and
I think
we
the
just gave them all attendance.
the part of this process that put me on edge with this is when our technical assistant from the state was like, whoa, that's really high. So either, we've also done some work too, just to dive into it a little deeper, working with Sarah Linsick and Steve Coughlin, and saying like, what are our reporting procedures? Like, could there be something there? And so we're trying to fine tune that and make sure that we're reporting accurately too, because maybe it's a reporting error. Because definitely the chronic absenteeism is not commiserate with low performance. So is there a reporting error somewhere? Are we reporting differently than other systems and things? So that's something we're looking into as well.
Yes,
And then
something doesn't seem right where the state's trending down and we're going the complete opposite directions. Something definitely seems off.
Absolutely the reaction that I had to.
Does this, and I'm sure you said this and I missed it through trying to absorb all the information, does this include excused absences or not?
It does.
It does,
Yeah.
okay. Because I was gonna say, I know it could be contingent upon us as parents too, to double check Power School and make sure that everything that is excused says should be excused as excused, because I know we had one that was missed just in our house. But if it includes excused, it doesn't matter, it's irrelevant.
Definitely makes you think. And so I think that's the biggest thing here is we want to make sure we're doing everything we can. If this is a concern, that we look into like our reporting procedures and make sure that we're reaching out home.
And parent notification
In
procedures as
talking
well.
with the principals, they know there are a number of students that need to be in school and they're just not getting here at all three schools for a whole variety of reasons, right? So we know, regardless of what this data says, we already knew that. We need to get those kids in school, and that's really important, so.
All right, great information, thank you.
Welcome.
9B.
Skip 9A, 9B, budget timeline overview.
Mr. Chair, it's that time of year. Mr. Messina takes front and center stage, so I will turn it over to Mr. Messina.
Thank you, Dr. Flanagan. So these slides are very similar to the slides that you saw last year, and they should be. Obviously, we want to keep our focus on teaching and learning at the schools as well as the district's SDI. And what we did a little bit differently is these three drivers that were questions that we posed to each of the building administrators and the department heads as more of a written assignment, that they would present answers to these three questions back to the superintendent. Superintendent would be able to go through them, and then we'd come to an admin meeting and just analyze what everybody turned in to him. This year, just to make it more of a give and take, is we did budget meetings in person. The superintendent and myself sat down with the administrative teams at all three schools, as well as department heads, student services, special ed, curriculum and instruction with Mr. Woodlock, and Mr. Piper with technology. And I think it was more beneficial for us to talk about where we were, where we are this year, and then what are the needs and what does it look like going into next year at each of the buildings. So these three questions led us to basically develop some initial plans as to where each school might need to focus and what are the positions. Again, a rollover of FTEs, full-time equivalents, not necessarily a position. So if we have to look at a different position, how can we make it work into our budget without increasing our headcount? Mr. Woodlock, you go to the timeline, and again, these timelines are very similar to last year. Proposing 3 budget subcommittee meetings in January, and then after the first 2, presenting our preliminary expense projections at the January 23rd full school committee meeting, as well as February 6th revenue projections at that point. And then February 27th school committee meeting, an initial budget presentation with members of the finance committee invited, similar to the last 2 years. And then March 12th, hopefully we are at a point where we can have the final FY25 budget approved. So the budget subcommittee members were fine with those 3 dates, similar to last year. We did, I did reach out if we wanted to have any discussions about trying to wedge in a December meeting. Again, the will of the 3 members of the budget subcommittee meeting, if any of them thought that that's something we need to do. I think we can handle it in these 3 meetings. And part of my concern with anything in the budget is if we start trying to hammer things down too soon, something changes. And then everything we've done at that point is out the window and we have to sort of reset. We always use, there's some financial cutoffs in the teacher contract surrounding December 31st in terms of notifications, which is very helpful to start focusing in on a budget after that. So that is the timelines we sort of laid out, and we'll start. The superintendent mentioned it's budget season, so we'll start digging in.
So just 2 comments there, if I may. If the committee is okay, I will reach out to the finance committee and invite them to our February 27th meeting, just so they can get that on their calendar
Please
at this
do.
point.
Yeah.
And then, the other thing that's important to say is, it's buried in that question, but those 3 questions, overarching questions that we ask administrators and department heads, but, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is we don't just pick up the staffing pattern and put it down the next year. We truly look at what our needs are, and positions will grow, positions will go away. And I think we heard some really important messages from our special ed presentation a few weeks ago about some of the needs there. We've heard from the curriculum office and teaching and learning office for several years about a literacy coach and things like this. So we're not gonna just say we're gonna move all these positions over. We're really gonna look at where we need to go, what we need to do to best meet the needs of our kids as identified in our SDI. That will, again, drive our budget development moving forward. So just want to bring it back to the SDI because that is the spine of everything that we do. That's all I have on that.
Very good. And we'll stick with Mr. Messina in finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Signing of bills, I do see them working around the table. There were 12 bill warrants presented to the committee tonight. In your drive is the list of warrant numbers, accounts, and amounts for those. For signing of payroll, nothing to do tonight. We will catch up on those at your next meeting in December 12th. And going back to December 12th and sort of tied into the budget, at that meeting, we will start looking at the capital asset plan. It's my hope to have a capital asset subcommittee meeting prior to, and then we can present our full plan to the committee after that meeting.
Perfect.
That's what I have.
We will also have a student group come to our December 12th meeting. I think it's the high school's gonna be back up in the rotation.
Okay.
I don't know which group yet, but a group from the high school's coming.
That's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Messina.
Thank you.
School committee discussion. Lieutenant Barry.
I'd like to just thank Officer Gustafson for coming today. I think he's a great addition to our school as a student here. We'd love to have him here, all of us. So yeah, thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I'm all set, thank you.
I'd just like to thank Mrs. Frechette for so many years of great service. She was a teacher when I was in the schools, and she's made a huge impact across all of our schools. So thank you, Mrs. Frechette.
I almost never say anything, but to echo that, I started teaching here with Jill Frechette, and she's one of the finest, nicest people I've ever met. And so, thanks for being a good friend and a great colleague.
I'm all set. Thank you.
I also have to thank Ms. Frechette. Having interacted with her both professionally and personally for the past 20 years in several buildings, both with myself and my son. Absolutely wonderful teacher. Great impact with the students, and even a nicer person than that. And she will be sorely missed. So thank you very much for all your many years of service here in Tyngsborough.
I want to thank Officer Gustafson for coming out with their presentation. Seems to be doing a really good job to start things off. Hopefully he keeps it up. I'm sure he will. I want to thank Mr. Woodlock. I always enjoy your presentations, but when you stop putting data up there, you really get my attention.
Get your
so.
juices flowing?
Yeah. I'll probably be reaching out, afterwards with some more questions, but thank you.
Thank you to Officer Gustafson as well. I have fond memories of our SRO as a kid, and so I love to see him so involved in schools. Also, thank you to Mrs. Frechette. My kids didn't have a ton of interaction with her, but she was one of a handful of teachers who did an enrichment program during COVID, and my kids were able to take advantage, and she just sounded so nice and so fun. So, just thank you and good luck in your retirement. And thank you, Mr. Woodlock. That is a lot of information, and it was exciting. I'm kind of with Ryan. Once you start giving me the info, I'm like, this is the stuff. So thank you. It's a lot, but it's good.
I'll be quick, but I have three things. Officer Gustafson, what an addition he's been. It's great to see him connect with the kids, just phenomenal. Second thing is I want to wish the kids who are going to give Kids the World a great trip and a really great experience, so please value that trip. I know that a lot of people, when the kids come back and they say it's really life-changing, so I hope they have a great trip. And the third thing is to my friend, Ms. Frechette, in my class of 2002 co-advisor. I will never get the memory of her dancing to Smash Mouth All-Star at the prom on the floor, with all the kids surrounding her, asking me to come out and dance. Clearly, we know I didn't go out and dance, but I'll never get that vision out. Jill, thank you for 26 great years. You will be missed. Thank you.
Thank you. I echo all the comments that were made about everyone this evening. The only thing I'd like to mention is Festival of Trees is going on also right now in the town of Tyngsborough. It'll be December 2nd and 3rd, I believe. Next weekend again. Please go out. It's a great venue. They do a lot of work. There's a lot of volunteers that work to set up the town of Tyngsborough, to put the lights up, to decorate the streets, the buildings. So thank you to all of them for that. And we do have need for an executive session tonight for two reasons. One, to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss the discipline or dismissal of, or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. The second is to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. We will return from executive session only to adjourn our regular scheduled meeting. This action requires a roll call vote. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
In favor?
In favor?
In favor?
In favor?
In favor.
In favor.
That carries 600. We are in executive session. Thank you and have a good night.